The views, opinions, and statements expressed by the host and guests of this podcast are solely their own and not intended as professional or medical advice. The content of this podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and listeners should not make any decisions or take any action based solely on the information provided. Listeners should always seek the advice of a qualified professional with any questions they may have regarding their own personal health, finances, or well-being.
Welcome to the Professional Winner Podcast. I am here with a special guest. This is an exclusive. We have only done this one other time. And the reason why we're doing this as an exclusive is because I have somebody who is near and dear to my heart, the OG, Fred Murphy. What's up, man?
What's up, JC?
How you feeling?
I feel with my hands, always have.
So just give you a little bit of background. Mr. Murphy was my teacher at FDA.
Yep.
Frederick Douglass Academy in Harlem. We go way back. I took your freshman global studies class, 9th grade.
That's right.
How long ago was that? 2011?
I don't know. Think about it.
I'm trying to tell your age here.
How dare you? Man? It's 2011. No, before that.
2009.
Right. Yeah.
And then 2010, he made me take one of the hardest classes I ever took, AP European Studies.
Made you? I sort of like asked you.
Yeah, asked me.
Yeah.
Kind of made me. I was scared.
Okay. All right.
But yeah, man, I'm so happy to have you here.
Pleasure, bro.
You're the perfect person for this platform to motivate, uplift. You have been a teacher 30 plus years. 36
if you count, but
36. In Harlem, tough community. You have helped change a couple of lives. Excuse me. I would say thousands of lives. There's not a lot of people who don't know your name in New York City as a teacher. So I'm just happy that you're here. I'm honored.
Honored to be here, bro.
And the stage is yours today, man. That's why I created this, to give people the stage that deserve it. So all right, go back in time. Inform me. Tell me where it started, where you're from, who you are, what's your social security, anything you want to give.
I'll give you the last 4 digits. That's about that. I mean, it's not, you know how when you talk, I don't know if you know, there's a musician, Joe Walsh. He plays with the Eagles. So Joe Walsh had this theory about life, which is, like your life can be a series of like random occurrences, but when you look back on it, it's like a finely crafted novel. Like everything sort of like fits in. So, I mean, I guess the basics, if this is about me being a teacher and teaching for that long, I mean, my old man was a teacher for his whole career, right? He had an uncle, my uncle, his brother was a teacher too. But I'd be lying if I said that there was like a path that was already there that I decided to follow. Getting into this was really kind of like a series of random occurrences. So as far as me getting here, I was born Irish Catholic family, 10 kids. Father's a public school teacher. So this was always, like for me growing up, obsessed with like food, like who's got a bigger, like the dinner table was just like, even right now, I'm always like on the scope, like see who's got what. Like I had one pair of pants in 9th grade, but it was just, everybody we knew had a ton of kids too. This is like classic suburban stuff. So that wasn't anything really, really different. Education is really big in my household. And it was always like, there was an expectation that you had to read books. You had to read books that were kind of like beyond, and you were expected to be able to talk about those in like a holiday setting. It was kind of like a, requirement. I'm not saying get up like old time Irish and recite poetry, but somewhere around there. So for me, it was just growing up in a big family. I knew that my old man, like he went to work, came home. He would be home in the summers. He always had second jobs. He worked in a home for like, they used to call them wayward boys. So he did that all the time too. But I did know that it seemed like, I would see him working at night and he would have papers to correct and all that stuff. And my older sisters would like do multiple choice. But it always seemed like he was reading material and getting ready for class. And I knew that my other uncle, his brother Joe, and this guy was a real character, and he always told me stories about teaching, and these were like two people that I looked up to, but at the same time, like I didn't, to quote Paul Newman and Cool Hand Luke, like I didn't plan a thing a day in my life, so as far as like me getting from upstate, which is just a huge difference to being in New York City, it's kind of a little bit of a story,
That's what we're here for. Tell us the story. So when was it? What college did you go to? All right. When you went to college, did you have a major that you think about?
I did. I went to a big ass suburban high school, and let's face it, suburbia at that time is pretty much a segregated community. I think I had 5 or 6 African-American students in my whole school. Played soccer with Herman Lewis. He was one. And then, graduated, went to Canisius College, which was a Jesuit school in Buffalo. And I was just telling, because I was working at my old school, FDA, yesterday, and I'm telling these kids about, my college experience. And I'm right up front. I said, look, I applied to one school, and it was March of my senior year. My mother was like, you're going to get, thrown out of the house if you don't apply. So I did, and I went to a school where I already had, I think 4 siblings had already gone there. So that was just like a path. I never thought for a second about college. This would be the constant theme in this conversation is I was in front of students like you and other students that were so much more motivated than I ever was. It was kind of like embarrassing, or you guys used to freak me out to be in class because I would look and I would go like, man, when I was that age, I just, high school was just it was like a requirement. I never really thought about it. So I did English and history as an undergrad. So it was a dual major. And then, I can tell the truth about this, right? So I'm 3 days away from graduation as a senior. Party is planned. I'm living with 4 guys in this house off campus. And I get a call from the registrar and they're saying, you failed a course. Now, I didn't just fail a course. I failed a pass-fail course. And do you understand how hard you have to work to do that? So then I had to do the not the walk of shame, but the call of shame, to call my parents. So I'm not graduating on time. Then I had to take a summer school class. And it was, the hits keep coming. There was 3 people in the class. One day I was the only one that showed up. This is summer school, right? Fell asleep on the dude. And I was the only one in class. So at some point I do this summer school. And then a friend of mine that I went to college with is from Queens. And he was working at a school called Xavier High School in Manhattan. Okay. He'd done a couple of summer programs there. And he said, look, they're looking for a history teacher. So first time I got on a plane, flew down, interviewed for the job. Had to wait the entire weekend. I had an older brother who was living downtown, and then found out I got the job on Monday, and that was like 3rd week of August. And within 10 days, I was I'd never really been in New York City before beyond that. And all of a sudden I'm in New York City. I show up, I had a sister and her husband. They had a big loft. He's an architect, 17th Street. Xavier was at 16th Street. So I showed up at their doorstep, never told them I was coming. And I just expected to move in. And that lasted about a month and a half. That was messy. So started working at Xavier and Jesuit school, 22 years old, right out of the gate. You remember, I can't use names though, right? There's an assistant principal at FDA right now. You know him. You were in his class. That was the Down Goes Frazier comment.
Oh, you could say his name. Come on.
Can I? All right.
Yeah, of course.
So Coos.
Shout out to Coos, man. We love you.
Absolutely. So when I started teaching, Coos was a junior in high school. So he was a junior at the school when I started teaching.
I never knew that.
Yeah. So I had a 5-year difference between me and my students. So I was at Xavier. Yeah. And that was just like baptism by fire. Coach freshman football, all that new teacher stuff that you do, man. There was, I don't know. Am I talking too much or what?
No, what?
Yeah.
You're talking. This is great. You're great.
So here's some knucklehead shit. First year teacher stuff. I'm teaching class and I hear this flick. And I look to my left and some kid, I'm like, I think this dude's got a nut. You know what I mean? So this is a Jesuit school. So you can make calls, because you got backup. So I sent him down to the principal's office, the assistant principal's office. This guy's the dean of students. He was a big dude. And he was that guy that people ran away from when they saw him in the hallways. Very calm, never did everything. So he's sitting outside of Mr. G's office. And I go down and I'm trying to flex on him. I'm doing that new teacher stuff. And I'm like, how dare you? So I said, how you brought a knife. So I'm sitting there and he flicks it open again, starts combing his hair. It's a switch comb that he had. So at that point, now I got a problem, which is you and I are sitting right there. The secretary's there and I'm up next. So I'm going to walk in and explain why this kid's out of class, why I'm out of class. And the kid keeps combing his hair and looking at me. So he totally got me. So I'm like, listen, I'm going to handle this myself. I went out in the hallway and I think I said something to the kid, but he just walked away. And I was a month and a half into the job, I'm like, man, this is gonna, you know what I mean? So there's that. I ran a Saturday football practice that made the New York Post. And the reason it made the Post was I coached freshman football. We went down to East River Park, got everything there, left the balls at the school. So no footballs for the entire football practice. So what did I do? I'm not going back to the school because I got to watch these kids. I give this kid $20, which works out to about $100 these days. This is 82, 83. I give him $20. This is a kid in full pads. He gets in a cab. I give him my keys to the school. He goes back to the school, gets the footballs, comes back, and we have practice. They called the dude Sleepy. His parents called him Sleepy. And it never occurred to me that the cab could have an accident. They might not pick him up, or he just might take my money. You know what I mean? So, you learn a lot as a first year teacher, but it was kind of like a baptism of fire. But in a way, I think that stuff makes you better than just being constantly like besieged by education jargon and all that stuff. I mean, old school, they threw you in a classroom and you kind of make it work, or made it work.
And so you from day one, you was always teaching history.
Yeah, I taught history then. When I got into other Catholic schools, I taught English, but it was normally, I think history and English are taught together. Like they should be the humanities. So that was that. Take
me when you transition and you said Harlem is the place that I fit in.
Well, yeah. After the second year, this is, I promise you, it's freaking me out because like this is, my father's having a 60th birthday party, right? Like I'm older than he is right now, and that just freaks me out. So he's having a 60th birthday party, and I'm flying home for that. Principal calls me, and this is April of 83. Principal calls me in his office on a Thursday. I'm flying out that Friday, and he says, your contract's not being renewed. So at this point, now, by the way, this is April, which means I still got to teach from May and June, but I know at this time I'm getting shit canned. So now I'm thinking like, what am I going to do? But I'll never forget this. This old dude, he's probably older than me. I mean, I'm older than him now. This guy, Jim Scott, he really liked me. These old guys that I taught would like me. And I knew that I wasn't really down with the inner circle. So he pulls me in his room and said, listen, kid, I heard what happened. And I never forget that he told me that you got to make sure that you teach your ass off right to the final day. Don't get caught up in this whole sour grapes and everything. So I did. Went home, had to tell my old man that I lost my job. And so by that June, I was done. This is 83. Now, 83 to 86, I worked construction full time in the city, which was one of my favorite things of all time. I think I was in my classroom on a Monday. The next Monday, I was working some jackhammer on some project in the West Village. And, at this point, I'm an upstate kid. So guys from Jamaica, the Hines brothers from Brownsville, Bed-Stuy, do or die. You got dudes from Puerto Rico, Dominican. So there's guys from Scotland. So there's this I don't want to say multicultural. That sounds really but just dudes from all over. And it just became this great experience. I was learning how to do carpentry, learning how to do concrete work and all that stuff. And just you meet really interesting people, man. Really, this guy, Juanito, they call him Juanito. He was 330, big dude. I work with Juan on concrete jobs, and that guy could work his ass off. So you really get caught up in that. And, it's a job site. It's the 80s. So they got Colombian tapers. So those dudes are really popular around payday, all kinds of alcohol and stuff. You go out to bars and all that stuff because everybody's young and they're making, pretty good money. And that was kind of that. But I mean, I don't know, I can tell the story, right?
Yeah.
So this really hit me is that it's break time. I had jobs before, but break time was just go fuck around somewhere. Break time on a construction job is it's you catch your breath, you're an athlete. So you catch your breath. So it's break time in the afternoon, and the construction supervisor, this guy Tony, classic Italian dude, could do, he was member of 5 unions, but there was a huge contingent of dudes from Mexico, Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic. I don't know if you're familiar. There's a term called pitufo.
No, I'm not.
Pitufo would be like Smurf. So there was a whole crew of Mexican dudes that were all relatively short. I'm short. So I became like a Pitufo. I was a Pitufo brother. So Juan came from the Dominican Republic, and he was a band leader. I saw a picture of him with the old timey, Rico Ricardo sleeves and everything,
Gotcha.
Calypso guitar and everything. So this, I don't know why this sticks with me, but break time, Juan brings out a guitar. Right. Now, these are all hard ass men, right, around me. I'm a young kid still and he starts playing guitar, and all these dudes start crying, openly weeping. And it didn't hit me. It hit me at that moment where they were from someplace that they really missed. And I was just from upstate, but I had no real sense of what place meant. And that always struck with me that number one, a hard ass dude could cry, but number two, I started thinking about my upbringing and everything. And it was just kind of, it wasn't that heavy into this is where I come from. And it was that sense of trying to find a sense of place. And that always stuck with me.
That's beautiful, man. So you did construction for a year.
So I'm going 83 to about 86. In the middle of that time, I was getting sick and tired of being sick and tired. I mean, it was just, I felt myself getting older. So I scrambled back into graduate school up at Fordham, Rose Hill in the Bronx.
Fordham, okay.
So I was taking grad classes, and I just told students this yesterday. I was at my old school. I said, look, I went to graduate school, but my grades were shaky because my college career was shaky. So how do you finance grad school? Well, you go to a bank and you take out a loan. And as I joke with students, I said, they're interested in you because they're going to charge you interest, right? So all of my classmates, these guys are on like full ride. So they spent all day, I was doing history. So it's like there's a lot of reading at that point. And they would be in the library all day. I was fucking hanging sheetrock in Soho, taking the train, D-train up to the Bronx, go down the hill, that whole scene. And so big surprise, I was getting waxed in class because I just didn't have the outside time to prep. Fought with that a little while. And then I just decided. So one of the guys in my class was teaching at a school called Rice High School. He was a Christian brother, right? So this guy was a Christian brother teaching at Rice High School. And he says, there's an opening for an English teacher. And so at that point, I knew I didn't want to do this construction much further. And then I went, first time I'd been above 110 since I was living in New York since 81. I went up and then I quote unquote interviewed at Rice. And I met this dude, Ed Flood, who became like a father figure to me. He was interviewing me, but like walking around the school, but he was like 5 feet ahead of me. And he's like, I'm on the move, kid. And he's just not really talking to me. But I love the fact that he was kind of ignoring me at the same time. But the thing, and this is here, like a small detail with teaching is like, every time he saw a piece of paper on the floor, he would bend over and pick it up. He had been at that school, by the way, since 62. So Ed Flood would tell me about coming out of the train. He was a Queens kid, right? Coming out of the train as a young teacher, Malcolm X is on a stepladder right there. He would pass him right on 25th and Lenox. So he had been there that long that when I got there, he was already there 25 years. So I just walked with him, right? He's since deceased, but he spent 44 years in that building. 44 years there. So Flood interviews me. I find out I get the job, and all of a sudden it's like put down the hammer and all that stuff. And I start in the fall of 86 on Lenox and 124.
Rice, man. They shut down when? 2000?
I think it was like 9 or 10, somewhere around there. Right after Kemba Walker was there.
It was so strange. Like
2008.
The whole world was paying attention to Rice. Kemba Walker, then he goes to UConn, makes the big shot, and then it's like Rice is closing.
Well, I mean, back in the day too, Felipe was there. I mean, They were the powerhouses in the 90s too.
Yeah, they have a strong history there. That's sad that they had to close.
No question.
I never knew that you even taught at Rice.
Did.
Yep. How do you get to Rice to FDA?
Okay, Rice is 86 to 97. So I'm there. Wow. I'm there for that.
Years?
Yeah. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. And at some point, administration, however you want to call it, like I went from being the solution to being the, whatever, to being the problem. So, and then I jumped and I was at All Hallows in the South Bronx for 2 years. And then my boy Pat, who taught with me at Rice, he went to FDA from Rice. So I think he was at FDA by like 94. And so I was at Rice, still there. He was always chirping in my ear, you got to come to this school. They're doing amazing things at this school. But for me, being in a Catholic school, we used to use like phrases like, you be good or we're going to throw you into public school. Like there was this whole concept that public school was this wild place. But FDA was that school that was like, it was charter before it was charter, So I went up to 97. I was at Rice. I went to 2 years at All Hallows. And then I went in, interview with Dr. Hodge. And I can say his name, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, went Dr. Hodge. And then I started in fall of 99.
Now, before we even get into the details about FDA.
Sure.
All Hallows, South Bronx, crazy area.
It was a little bit. Yep.
Yeah.
I mean,
Rice still has a history.
I mean, Rice,
you can say it's Catholic school, but it's still predominantly.
Dude, there was some.
Still predominantly a lot of people from low income areas.
There were some hard rocks in that school, no question.
So how you go from before we even get into FDA and tell some of my personal stories of you as a teacher.
Yep.
Upstate.
Okay.
Catholic.
Let's talk about it.
First time, 83, you said, right? In New York City. So
I came in fall of 81.
81.
Right.
How was that transition? And you're learning, not only are you learning how to kind of be a teacher, because you're still learning, right? You did the, right?
I never do no student teaching, which by the way, I mean, I'm I don't know if there's like educators out there, but like I'm a teacher, I'm not an educator. Like there's a difference between the two. And I never took an education class, which I had to do when I did public school. But all I knew was that I was teaching history. They threw some books at me, and I forgot to say this, but like, bro, my first class ever, I was like, I'm waiting in class, right? And I'm a wreck. And I'm waiting, the bell rings, nobody shows up. And I'm like, man, these kids, everything. I wasn't just in the wrong room. I was in the wrong building. So I'm saying,
how nobody showed up to my
and
class?
I'm indignant, right? So there's this older teacher, and he literally he looks at me, dude. That day when I was walking in, I'm getting muscled in the hallway because they think I'm a student. You know, it's like one of those like bad rom-com or something like that. So the old teacher looks at my schedule like I'm a kid. He goes, you're in the wrong building, kid. So then I hustle in and I walk in late to my first class, and the all boys school, they all look up at me, and then I just. Like, dude, out of sheer panic, I threw one kid out of every class that day for no reason. Because I thought I was gonna like make a rep or something, but it was so transparent. You know what I mean? Just trying to like, but you didn't. I mean, you were just. I mean, I'm thankful in a way because you were on your own and you just had to make it work. But like, look, I was typing using typewriter. You dig what I'm saying? Like that's how long ago this was. Like Walkmans were just a thing at this point. So like in terms of the arc of this, I always think about, I started on a typewriter and my last class ever was Zoom. Like the bookends of like, you know, how a career goes. So
that's crazy, man.
But let's talk about the upstate stuff. I mean,
you come from upstate.
Indeed.
Live in New York City.
Dude, you
learning how to be a teacher. And
right.
Now I'm gonna say it. Black communities.
No question.
Tough communities.
Yep.
What's going through your head? How you surviving this?
So like Xavier was kind of like now it's kind of like a staging ground because Xavier, it was really a mixed school, predominantly these these Irish kids from Rockaway, man. These dudes were ridiculous, like just fighting all the time. It was just, you know, it was crazy. And I thought they were like my Goombas or whatever, but Xavier was very, very mixed. So, and then I'm not trying to make this into like a novel or something, but like my experience in construction, I used to work with these dudes in Brownsville, and Brownsville was like Brownsville in the early 80s, bro.
Yeah.
The Hines brothers, and they were classic South Carolina, moved up north, Junebug and Coy, Hines, right? And they would have these barbecues, and Junebug always called me baby boy. He said, listen, baby boy, he said, I'd invite you, but our neighborhoods are like a little bit rough. Like it said, you know, that sort of neighborhood segregation in that sense. And he just felt that it was like too. And I was like, bro, you know, let's go. But construction also got me working with dudes from Jamaica, you know, guys from Scotland, but all that, I work with this crew, this Russian guy was doing the plumbing in the whole building. Russian Sammy, his whole crew was Spanish. He spoke no Spanish, they spoke no Russian, but they were doing like the pipes for the entire, you know, building. So it just, in a sense, it was definitely an education for me because, I mean, if you put on paper, I mean, I grew up in a segregated suburb, no question. My education was segregated. Five kids in my high school out of 2,500, African-American, for sure. So coming to New York, I mean, the way I was like, you could tell you're a rookie in New York. When cabbies would beep, I would do like this. Because in the suburbs, if someone beeps, they know you. And it took me like years to not like turn around and all that stuff. But so the construction was kind of a staging ground because I worked really tight. I worked on this job with this Dominican kid, Dennis. I still remember his name. We worked together doing in Soho when they were buying up like buildings in Soho. We were doing like sandblasting. So it was kind of, I mean, I don't know how else you say it, but I was kind of getting acclimated to people that had very different upbringings than me and very different environments too. Now, 124th Street and Lenox Avenue in 86, I mean, it's not New Jack City, but you know, like shit's happening. Yeah. Like, I mean, definitely there was not a crack house per se, but there was a very busy residence down the block from us. You know, it was the classic thing. I mean, it's the 80s. I don't know how else to phrase it, but you stepping on vials, going to school. And dudes on crotch rockets. This is before they started. All these brownstones are warehouse, but you definitely, like, you knew things were happening. I don't know why I remember this, but you ever heard of there was a documentary, this dealer called Alpo?
Yeah.
Right. Alpo is West Harlem, right? So this kid, Donald Jackson, senior, I didn't teach him, but he was just like hilarious. But he was like, man, you know what Alpo, and he's talking about Alpo in real time. said, Alpo made this dude get down on the ground and eat dog shit because he owed him money. So I would hear this stuff, but like, honestly, like my being on Lenox, you know, and side streets around the school, it was rare you saw a white person. And if you did, the assumption was in the neighborhood that you were working at Rice. So, you know, it was just kind of the way it is. But I don't know how else to say it, John, but Harlem was definitely really, really busy at that point. But at the same time, I never witnessed anything that you would like see in a movie. You dig what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like no New Jack City shit, none of that. It's just, you just saw, it was just kind of every day. And I guess because I was there every day, it just became kind of like
normalize it. Yeah.
Can I talk about the Lenox Lounge?
You could talk about everything and everything. It's the beauty of a podcast. Okay. We don't got no time limit.
All right.
I want you to talk as much as you can.
All right. you asked for it, bro. So there was I don't know, you've seen Malcolm X, right? The film?
Mm-hmm.
All the bar scenes in Malcolm X were the Lenox Lounge. Mad Men, that first season of Mad Men, when he's in the Half Moon booze in there and there's just smoky, that was Lenox Lounge. There's been 124, 125 on Lenox. Old school place, like Billie Holiday sang there. And this is just when the Lenox Lounge was still a neighborhood joint, but people were looking and you would start to see these like white German tourists come in. But
is that the one that, what's the film? Well, Forrest Whitaker, Bumpy Johnson.
American, what's it? Was it one with Russell Crowe?
No, it's the new series that's out now.
Oh yeah, called The Godfather of Harlem.
Godfather of Harlem. Is that the same thing?
They do. They represent it, but you know, I'm that like old fucker that's just like, but they get it wrong. It wasn't a walk down into place. It was just like two open doors. But so the Lenox Lounge, Rice was right there. The lounge was half a block away.
Wow.
So that became our joint. And it was always, I'm going to tell a story here, but it was always, we were the only ones not of color in that place. But it was also our joint to the fact that we got our names on glasses behind the bar. A cop owned it, and his wife ran it. And it was kind of in a state of disrepair. When Spike did Malcolm X, he put a ton of money into it, and the lounge really, really got sort of like nice and fancy. And then ironically, it becomes a spot, and all of a sudden prices start going up and the neighborhood people get, pushed out.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, this story is near and dear to my heart. So I'm in the lounge. I'm working with a couple of other teachers there. It's Friday night, so we're just looking, and I was teaching Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison at that point. Gotcha. And that book not only knocked me out, but teaching Invisible Man, 7 stories up in Harlem, and you can see all the landmarks from the book. You can see the Y right there. Yeah. Mount Morris Park is right there. You know what I mean? Yeah. The final scene. So I'm in there, and we're talking about Invisible Man. One of us has our book out, and there's this really, really big dude at the end of the bar, and he's like giving me the eye, and I'm thinking, what the fuck? You know what I mean? Like because it's, you just looking like, okay, is this where I got to kind of explain why I'm here? So he walks towards us, and he's 6'4", 6'5", built like a fucking house. And all of a sudden he falls right into the conversation with us about the book. Like he starts talking about the book. And I promise you, this is like, I just met this dude, right? And I didn't even meet him. Like there's no face-to-face. So he starts talking to me, and then like something, I don't know how to describe it. He starts clicking. So he goes, where'd you go to college? I said, Canisius College. He said, me too. So I'm like, what's the odds? What are the chances of that, right? Now, you said, where'd you go to college and everything. I imagine you don't have your diploma on you right now. He did. So he pulls out his diploma and he starts talking to me. And so I start asking about teachers that he had. And all of a sudden this thing starts clicking. So I'm going to hit pause in that part of the story, right? So my father, 81, I think, has a massive heart attack. Has bypass. So he retires from the classroom, but he misses the buzz cut. You know what I mean? He misses that buzz. So he doesn't go back to his school because he's retired. So he ends up getting in a program. Now the program is at my college, Canisius College. My father was a graduate. He went on a GI Bill in the 50s, right? So he's in this program. The program has professors and also local teachers who've taught AP, and they go to Attica and teach class. So my father taught at Attica for 7 years after he retired. Maximum security, right? 25 to lifers. And he would teach them history, and he would tell me stories about, like when we would have a test, you separate the desk and everything. So my old man, the guards gave him a hard time, and he hated the guards. And that's another reason his students liked him. He called them my kids, and these guys are like, what in there? So he's setting up the desk for a test, and one of the guys has his feet on the desk in front of him, and he goes, you got to move your feet. And the guy looks up, he says, look, bro, says, I'm a murderer, but I ain't no cheat, which is interesting, right? So he starts asking me about, and I ask him about the professors that he has, and he starts naming all these professors. And then it hits me. So then he goes to me, what's your last name? So I give him my last name. And then he goes, is your father Fred Murphy? Is your father Fred Murphy? I said, yeah. And then, it sounds like I'm fucking making this up. Then the guy grabs me, he says, your father changed my life. So that is crazy. The guy he did a 10-year bid, and he had my father for, I think, 2 or 3 classes, runs into me at the Lenox Lounge, recognizes the facial, I don't see it, but he recognizes it. And then all of a sudden, like, I can't buy a drink. The guy's got tears in his eyes. So for me, for teachers, you never know when you're going to run into a former student. So I ran into a former student. It just wasn't mine. It was my old man's. So I gave him my old man's number, and they talked that night.
And that's crazy.
I mean,
how, like, also, the coincidence of that happening.
Also, the dude, I think he was, his bid was, I think he was back maybe about a week and just happened to be there right at that point. And I could not get over like the small world aspect of that. But at the same time, and I probably forgot to mention this, but when my old man was teaching at Attica, first of all, his students loved him, and he hated the fucking guards, because this is when, like, the guards did not feel that as an inmate you should be able to get an education. And my father was like adamant, and like these other professors too that did it. So he always gave the guards a hard time. Like, he couldn't bring maps and all that stuff. But the funny thing was that he would mention, this was like the mid 90s, right? So he would mention that I was teaching at Rice, and that he had been to the Lenox Lounge with me prior to this, So, and the inmates would say, you don't want your son hanging out there. It's like too dangerous. So there's like, there were shady characters, but that was New York at that point, So here's kind of I guess, I'm not trying to make this a segue, but this is kind of how it is. So my old man, this is 99 in the spring. I'm leaving All Hallows to eventually, I didn't know, but I was going to come to FDA at that point. Mm-hmm. So he calls me like in April of 99 and said that they had a scan and he's been diagnosed with lung cancer. Now, he was, he grew up born in 1923, Great Depression. He was one of 9 kids. World War II, that was a smoking generation. So he had quit, but it just caught up with him. So it was a really intense arc from like April to August. He got really sick really quickly. So fast forward to August of 99, August 30th, I'm at home. They're doing hospice care, right? So I'm at home. I'm home with my sister. So it's funny in a way, but like this is back when VHS tapes, there's no fucking whatever. So my sister, yeah, exactly. So my sister in California sends all the VHS tapes of Seinfeld, because my father really likes Seinfeld. So he's got all these VHS tapes. For the first time, he's on oxygen. So there's like oxygen tanks, and that's when it gets really real. Like, It's almost like, how when you wax a car and the water goes on the hood of it and it kind of beads up. Like, that's what the oxygen is doing on his lungs. It's trying to get him there, but he's not really there. So he wants to watch Seinfeld. So I put in a Seinfeld episode. This is the night he's going to, he passes away that night. And the Seinfeld episode is one where one of Jerry's friends lies to Jerry about having cancer. So like, and this comes up right there, and I'm just like, what are the chances of all these things right there? So I'm wiped, and I'm like, look, I gotta go. I gotta go to sleep. I'll see you in the morning, right? He stays up and watches a couple more episodes, and then like 4:00 in the morning, my sister gets me. This might be it, and then right there, just I watched somebody take their last breath. It was like a movie, you know what I mean? Yeah. So at that point. And here's where the FDA thing comes in. At that point, I had already been hired at FDA, and I was going to start, I think I had like September 4th or 5th, there was like some orientation thing. So for me, the start of a new school year, it was always, man, I can't wait to tell my old man this. I can't wait to tell him about this asshole. And then it hits me that he's not going to be there, So I started FDA in September of 99, brand new to the school. And, I had 15 years already, but when you're in a new school, you're a newbie, and it's all about, you got to get a rep. So like from day one, and for me, it was also public school. And here's the funny thing is like, I never taught girls before. And I was panicking about that because FDA at that point, when FDA was probably 70-30 girls to boys in the early days. Girls are better students in middle school. So I just remember standing at my classroom door and trying to like, okay, you can do this. You did this before. And just, dude, it was, and also public school, big classes, man,
Yeah.
So at that point, I didn't understand how academically challenging this school was, because Hodge had actually kind of like not under the table, but I tutored at FDA on Saturdays when I was still working in the Bronx, and I would come in on Saturdays and it looked like, Catholic school's closed. FDA, it looked like a regular school day because everybody was doing review, everybody's doing Regents prep, and it was this climate of kids there all hours of the day too. I always kind of joked that it was a center for the community, but it wasn't a community center. You know what I mean? It wasn't just a place to hang out. There were academic expectations. I mean, Hodge, if you were a new teacher there, you had better perform or he was going to move your ass out.
Yeah, you had to do activities. He wasn't joking.
No, he was not at all.
No, we considered you when I was at FDA the guru of APs. So it's like, if you was going to talk to Murphy, you knew something about APs and getting prepared for college. That was instant. So when was FDA the first time you taught an AP, or did you do any of that?
It was definitely the first time. I had an honors program when I was at Rice, and I was like an adjunct professor at Fordham, but that was more title than anything else. And the thing with AP is, and man, when you say AP, I keep thinking about DeSantis in Florida, man. Like I want to go off on a fucking tangent on that guy. But
you can?
I will. So just remind me later. But so AP, when I started in 99, AP was just growing. I think there were two. And Hodge says, do you want to teach AP? So I picked, because my graduate degree was in, medieval studies and everything. So I just figured I would take AP Euro because I figured there was, Western Civ and everything. So I started that in 2000. That was the first time I taught it. And it kicked oh my God, I never worked that hard in my life. Double periods. But what began to grow at FDA was this culture. And then Hodge, to his credit, and the DOE, man, I want to talk about the DOE. Here's what the DOE, the Department of Education, they do a great job at making sure that your school's going to be fucking mediocre. If they give you rules and regulations and you follow all those steps and you line up with everything, all the dictates that they have, you will have a mediocre ass school. But like what Hodge did was he was a wild man, like a free agent, and he knew that budgetary stuff aside, but what he knew is that if you're going to get kids to compete with Stuyvesant, with Townsend Harris, with all these other New York City schools, and then the private schools on the Upper East Side, you needed a kid to have 4 or 5 or 6 APs on their program. So he started expanding it, and he started recruiting teachers to do just that. So for me, I think the first year I taught, I might have had 4 kids get a 3, but by the third year, it was 80% passing, and then it, went from there. But it really, it's tough to describe, and you were part of it, but it's tough to describe that culture to someone because it's almost like you can't believe that it's happening. Let's bring the H word out. This shit was happening in a Harlem school, and it was like for real, for real.
And from personal experience, it was life changer. We was talking about it off camera. Like I remember Stony Brook University freshman year EOP program. Africana Studies, it was one of our requirements that we had to do good in this school to get the scholarship. First test, 99. Second test, 97. Everybody was like, yo, what type of notes is that? It's like, I did this in AP Euro.
Cornell method, right?
Yes. Yep. Cornell method. Like all of these things I learned that my parents were never going to give me a tutor. Like I would have not been prepared for college like most of my friends were when we got there. But all of the APs, AP Bio and Ms. Brown. And I remember freshman year, global history, you standing outside the door. I think by the third day, you were saying who's going to AP.
Yep.
I think our first week we didn't do no global. We literally talked about what is it going to take for you to go to college. And, you come from a middle school. I came from middle school with metal detectors in the South Bronx.
Right.
I'm the smartest kid because I could read at grade level. And I got kids in 6th grade who's 15. Metal detectors, gangs. And then you go to FDA.
And then you find yourself, and there's a lot of big fish in this pond.
Yeah. And then you go to FDA and it's like, I'm normal in week 1. Like, what is it? I didn't even know what AP meant.
Right.
And it's like, this is a college preparatory. And it's like this is the standard. Where you want to go. You have old students coming back talking to us. So I was like, all right, when we going to learn global? And then it got out of nowhere. It was like, time to pick it up. Or you going to pass the Regents. And then it's like,
no question.
You going to AP, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. And so it was just a culture there.
And it's also, I mean, I have, and I want to talk about sort of like another angle, you know, like my sister in Connecticut and how she came in and worked with it, like that whole scene too. But like,
yeah, that was awesome too. I remember that.
Like I had nephews growing up in New Canaan, Connecticut, which is high money, totally white bread suburb. And the AP class that you took with me, AP Euro, they wouldn't let those kids take it until they were seniors. And I taught it to sophomores, you know? So there's that, but I always, you know, and this is, man, we should talk about this too, bro. Is this like this, I don't know if I should say this shit either, but like, I don't know how this is going to be perceived. But like, this is not some white savior fucking story. You dig what I'm saying? Like there were a series of like crazy things that occurred and I found myself on 148th Street teaching there. But my part of me was always like, I got to challenge these kids. Like I gave you books to read that I didn't read till I was in college. Yeah. Candide never read it. Frankenstein never read it. Metamorphosis never read it. Like I never did it. Oh man. And it was just, look, it was my assumption that I'm going to do this whether people, and especially when people would kind of get in my ear, like, you know, don't you think this is a little like that whole like above someone? I'm like, at that point, it's like a bull seeing red. Like I'm definitely going to do it at that point. So I just knew that I couldn't look at you as high school students. I had to look at you as college students. And I'm not trying to sound all fucking high and mighty with that shit, but that's just how my brain operated, which is.
But beyond that though, like I'm gonna tell a personal story. That's okay?
Yeah.
Senior year, in the junior year, excuse me. I already took an AP class. Remember I went back to Virginia. Parents lost custody of me, went to Virginia, moved my brother, came back. I'm in art class. And I literally found out a week before I was going to be a father. I'm in art class. I'm with Marvin Bell. Remember Marvin? Marvin, Jonathan Brown sat next to each other in your AP Euro. Dude, mad at you half the time. Bro, like, yo, this guy's tripping, man. What do you think? We all in 10th grade. Like, what are we reading all of this for?
JB was right over there. Yeah. Right, I still remember where he sat.
And Marvin was right here.
Exactly.
He was right there.
And by the way, Marvin was, I don't want to use the word low-key. Marvin was fucking hilarious, man.
Oh, yeah.
That kid had like this really sharp intellect. Anybody that I know that's really funny, you can tell that they're smart, but he just had that way about him. Hilarious.
Yeah. You remember like telling me like, yo, Marvin, John, stop talking all the time.
Oh my God. But yeah, we don't stop talking now.
nah. That's so 11th grade. So I'm sitting there. Marvin's like, yo, you been acting weird these last couple of days. Yep. And I'm like, Mom, I'm gonna be a father, man. Marvin busts out laughing.
You think you were joking?
Yeah. And I bust out crying.
No.
And he grabs me and brings me to your class. And you like.
Right at that moment?
Yes.
Get the fuck out of here.
And you're looking at me like, what's wrong with him? And Marvin's like, tell him.
So wait, I had you in global, but not AP yet, right?
No. This is 11th grade. 11th grade. I'm done. I took your global. I passed your AP.
Right, because I was wondering, like, why is Marvin bringing John here?
No.
Like,
we weren't in your class no more.
Yeah, I'm like, why are these guys here?
Yeah, we're not even in your class no more. Yeah. I left, came back to the school.
Yep.
Could be the end of 11th or early 12th. Marvin brings me to you. And I'm like, Mr. Murphy, I'm gonna be a dad. And you go, it was a solid pause. I'm crying. You asked Marvin to leave. Yep. I'm literally sitting at my old desk that I sat at in the AP year.
Old desk, man. For sure.
You sit down. It felt like an hour, but it was probably like 3 minutes.
God damn it. I hope I said something.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you what you said.
All right.
So you're applying to college, right? I was like, I guess. And I was like, yo, that's crazy, right? But my mind, the reason why I bring up that story is because, and you was very supportive of me. You know, you just didn't say, oh, you go to college, forget that. But you made it clear, like, now more than ever, you got to change something now. Like, now the pressure is on.
Yep.
Like, if you had doubts about doing anything, that's what your child needs.
Yep.
And it went straight from, you know, like, I'm here for you, but we need solutions right now. And kid, you got to be the student I know you could be and get back on track where you was freshman and sophomore year.
I think, because I probably like flashed forward to, I think I probably thought immediately about your employment.
Yeah.
And specifically why at that moment it was so much more significant. And then I just, you know, I guess my default was always, like when I said before, looking at you as a college student. So I just probably out of nervousness, but that's the first thing I thought of was like, You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I say that to say, and I'm pretty sure like in FDA and all the years you taught in the environments you taught, that you got millions of stories of kids going through things and you having to support them. But like, how is that journey? Because like I always say, like when you teach at the FDA, when you teach at the All Hallows in the South Bronx, like you just can't be a teacher, you know? Like you got to take on a lot of baggage. Like we became your kids in a say, you know, and me as a, you know, I wouldn't say I'm not teaching a specific class, but as a first year teacher of debate and teaching kids and having these kids, like I take on a lot from these kids. So I only can imagine, you know, and I see nowadays people are teachers for 2 years and they think they have all this experience. They're writing books. And
bro, don't get me started.
So when you with 36 years of experience and all the things, like how was that, like taking on our baggage, taking on our stress and trying to relate to us even when we felt like there were things you couldn't relate to us? You know, I would love to hear your theory on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, because it seems kind of, it would seem to be a stereotypical thing. Yeah. Because I wasn't some fucking crusader. That's key. Yeah. I knew, number one, that, and as kind of shaky a high school and a college student as I was, this is why construction really worked for me, is that I love working really hard. I love getting jobs that other people like. This is going to seem like a random thing, but like this was a non-union job. Remember the actor Philip Seymour Hoffman?
No, sorry.
Okay, but so this is a West Village job. It wasn't a union job. So like on big jobs, you get a concrete truck and you just back it up. These jobs, you used to make concrete on the site, which meant you had to get like 8-9 tons of sand on the street. So when the sand came, I wanted this shovel. I didn't want the fucking wheel, but like I wanted this shovel because I wanted to shovel sand for an hour and a half. Like I love that feeling, right? So this is probably an awkward segue as far as teaching goes, but the couple things that I knew was that I was in a thankful position because there was so much that had to get done. Kids are hilarious. So there's just always being around. Like I can't, stay with me on this one. When I was at Rice, this kid, still remember this kid's name, Ed Sid. So we're doing this brand new course that I helped develop called Humanities, Discussion Circle, everything. So we're doing public speaking, right? So Ed Sid gets up and he's like, his public speech is how to stay home from school sick, how to fake sick. So all of a sudden, all the kids have their notebooks. Like I would like try to get your, you know, but all of a sudden they're like this. So and I had never heard this before, and I never heard it since. So what he would do is he would go into his bathroom and start like dry heaving, and he would take cherry Kool-Aid and sprinkle it in the toilet. So his mother would come in, toilet's all red. And she says, you can't go to school today, right? So this kid is like doing, and all these kids, and I'm like, man, did I just like, because then I'm thinking what attendance is going to be like. Same kid, by the way. So we're starting this brand new course, got brand new books. Ed Sid is sitting right next to me. I got someone watching because they heard that this discussion is going really well. So the kid's sitting next to me and he leans forward and I'm like, right? He leans forward and then the same kid he pukes all over his desk and all over mine. And in the moment it looked kind of red, you know what I mean? But like, it's like that type of random stuff with kids. I can't tell you, there's always, like I had this kid.
He took all it out of school to the extreme.
And he backs up. I said, you got, you know what I mean? Because there was round 2 coming and I'm like waving the book to try to let it set in, but we kept the discussion going. But like, it's that stuff. But as far as like the bigger question, I probably didn't answer that properly, but like, did I know I was in the middle of something? Definitely did. Now, is there a way, like, I think I can describe it to you, but is there part of this, like, how would I ever describe shit that I see on a daily basis to somebody who's not in the game? Like, you talk to a fellow teacher, just as you would talk to a fellow student, they would get it. Like, you get to the end of the day and I would talk to Quesada or something like that, and it would just be like, man, I was just it. But at the same time, the best way to describe it is, it's like a legit narcotic. Like, I was going to ask you if I can curse, but it's fucking you up, but you can't get away from it because the buzz is so big that you have these moments in class. And my father used to say that he would want to get up on his desk and just stand there because he was in showbiz. And so I'm going to take it back to my old man for a second. That story I told about the Lenox Lounge with that guy, Rodney. So when my father died, the eulogy that I gave, and I was nervous to give that, but the eulogy I gave was that story. And the other part of it was a former student of mine, Felix, who I helped with his SAT. I paid for his SAT. He was at 128, and I think Adam Clay, but he ended up going to Columbia on a full ride. And I was close enough with him at that point because I was out of, Rice, and I called him because he had My father taught my class for me a couple of days. So he came to Rice, taught my class, and he met this kid. So I told Felix that he died, and Felix sent me this email, and he was taking classes at Columbia, and you do like the Iliad, the Odyssey, all those things. So Felix said to me, and this was the second part of my eulogy, Felix said that, look, your father has gained immortality because people will always talk about him, and that's the way that someone remains immortal. You know what I mean? So it was between the running into the former student and that. So as far as like trying to describe the day to day, like were there days I wasn't thrilled to be in the classroom? No question. Like getting up and making this happen. But at the same time, there's just innumerable stories of encountering kids. And it's always like, it sounds kind of crazy, but like it started to define who I was. Like it made me who I am in a way. So as far as like the transition thing, the always commuting up to Harlem and coming back, like you're cross commuting. And was I aware that I was the white guy on the bus or the white guy on the train? I mean, I guess partially just because of like skin color. But when you start going surface below, like what does that mean? I'm still trying to figure that shit out. Like there wasn't times where I would look around my classroom and say, I'm teaching all children of color. Like I wouldn't do that. Because normally I'd be looking around like, why doesn't that kid have this? You know what I mean? Like it's that stuff. But was there pressure that just came to me because you would have kids having bad days and all this stuff? I mean, I'm sure that was the case, but you just gotta fucking roll with that stuff. I don't know if that was a really like academic answer, but
no, it's a great answer. In your 36 years of teaching, there's things you wish you changed or things you did better? Or
want me to start fucking checking off like little mistakes you made? Remember the dude with the switch cone?
Yeah.
He was a classic rookie mistake I made when I was at Rice. Yeah. Now I'd been out of the game for 3 years working construction. So I was doing like that classic homework check thing. So I'm going up and down the rows. I had a small ass classroom I would get 37, 38 kids in that class. So it's just straight rows or everything. I'm checking homework and like kid at a time. And I can't understand why these kids won't stop talking. And the rookie mistake was I didn't give them something to do while I was doing that. So if I checked a kid's homework, he would like, I'll just wait until he tells me what to do. But it's like little things like that. But as far as like the regret aspect of it, I don't know. I mean, again, it's back to that Joe Walsh quote that you look back and you think like everything was well crafted. But I mean, all I did was find myself in situations like when I taught AP, I didn't know what textbooks to order. I figured I could just get a college text but you learn stuff along the way. Ed Flood, that guy, I'm going to bring him up a lot, but he always taught me like if stuff is hectic, you walk towards it. If it's hectic, but you run away from it to get help if something like jumps off. So his big thing to me was don't let him see you smile until Christmas. That was always his thing. But at the same time, Ed Flood was funny. He could make kids laugh. I was funny. I could make kids laugh, but I wasn't like overly kind of jokey. So I think that there's got to be a little bit of mystery as far as like who you are as a person, because I think kids kind of dig that. I mean, I've seen too many teachers try to be too relevant with students right off the bat. I was in this school and this teacher came in and he was like a magician or something like that. So, the guy said, he tells me, and I know he wants me to ask him to show me a trick, which of course I don't do because I know it's going to piss him off, right? So in a week, he was doing magic tricks in his class. Now, that's something you do in June, but if you do it in September, are you going to be sawing people in half in December? You know what I mean? It's that idea of, you got to kind of know there should be a little distance between that. You're not there to be like your students' friends, They got friends.
I have a question for you. As a huge AP advocate, how do you feel about what's going on in Florida? And be honest, be brutal.
Yeah, I think there was a quote I read someplace where you can ban books, you can later burn people. So if you think about the two examples, I mean, if people even know this shit, the two examples of fascism in the 20th century are Italy and Germany, right? Italy and Germany were democracies that failed. So what happens in a failing democracy is that there's things like economy that the government can't solve. So people start looking for the strong man that's going to promise them the moon, that's going to get them to the promised land. So when people mention, when people on the left mention that this is an example of fascism, the classic, you check off the boxes. If you can start controlling access to information, I don't know if we did 1984 when I had you.
No.
Yeah.
We definitely did Frankenstein, Candide.
So in 1984, there's a line that Orwell uses is that if you control the present, you control the past. You control the past, you control the future. So in Florida, when they start talking about African-American AP, and I knew that this class was coming for a while, and when the governor says there's no academic value to it, I mean, what does that tell you? Because you go from MAGA, but see, now they're not even hiding it anymore. This is just flat out, let's make America white again, right? And let's be upfront with the fact that not only do we not value people of color, but we don't value the history because it's going to make Connor or Aiden feel bad about shit that is like quantifiably, this stuff is all legit and all true. You know, like those, I sent you those books a couple of weeks ago,
yes.
Right? The one written by Oshinsky is just like, there's no question that all this stuff happened. And I thought, and I was an AP advocate, I was part of that position. I taught AP, but like the fact that the College Board didn't go to Florida, in my mind, I thought the movie is this. The College Board goes to Florida and say, look, we're going to decertify every one of your classes. So there's no AP in the whole state of Florida. So now all these swanky private schools or public schools in the suburbs where kids want these APs, they can't take them anymore. So what do? Magically, somehow, the College Board starts restructuring this AP, African American Studies class. Now, if you can't do critical race theory in an advanced placement history class, what's the point of even having it? So when DeSantis does this is all just, I'm thinking this is like just upfront. We place no value on this. And frankly, we don't want to be reminded about what happened. We just want to move forward because I still think their assumption is that because Obama got elected, we're in a post-racial society as far as they're concerned. You stop the average person on the street and ask them who's George Floyd, might take a second, depending upon where you are. So I thought that, it didn't surprise me knowing who DeSantis is, but the idea that, especially those titles that I gave you and having, I'm reading the 1619 Project right now. And there's this moment, can I ramble for a second?
Please keep going.
All right. So there's this moment when the colonies are starting to get labor from Africa, right? So eventually what happens is you've got indentured servants who are Scottish, Irish, coming over here. They work for 7 years and then they get their freedom, right? But now you start to have this source of labor that you got to pay for. But now the question is there a way we can kind of get around paying for it? And they come up with the system. European is a patriarchy, right? So the idea of a child is born, then the child is classified based upon the father's lineage, right? So what do they do in the colonies? They switch it. What allows slave owners to rape their slaves is the children born to those slaves would not be considered white, the master, they're going to be considered black, which is the female. And then what it allows you to do is to rape with impunity. They don't get a possible inheritance because the land's going to go down to the firstborn son, right? Who's white. And at the same time, it allows them to rape women, have children that are born, and then they become property that they don't have to pay for. They get a little older and you send them to work. Now, this shit is all incontrovertible. Now, the fact that why someone would not want this taught in schools because you're worried about someone's fucking biorhythms or something is beyond me, but it's happening. And I guess what I'm saying is when Orwell in the book, if you're in charge and you can control access to information, you can control how people think. And also, if you start wiping shit away, if you get rid of that stuff, then someone's never going to read about it. And if you go a generation or two, never happened, right? That's why Spielberg did the Shoah Project. So he interviewed 100,000 survivors of the Holocaust. It's all recorded. Now, you could say that it never happened, but there's someone telling you about their time in Bergen-Belsen or their time in Auschwitz. So if you get rid of that record, then you erase history, and then you get this whole American idea that now we're just going to move forward. Or you get a watered down fucking version of AP African American Studies that maybe people aren't going to want to teach because they're going to be watched like a hawk, and maybe a kid, even a white kid, maybe not want to take because he's going to be worried about how he's going to be viewed. So do I have thoughts on DeSantis? Yeah, I fucking do.
That was a amazing analysis of what's going on in Florida.
Got a little carried away, I guess.
Nah, that was perfect. It was the truth and it was real. And what's going on there is very dangerous. And I gotta ask you some things, man. I know you know I'm writing a book. Me and you have talked about it.
I have.
Off camera many times.
You mentioned
went
that.
to lunch. I always come to you for advice. You have just sent me some books.
Yeah.
That you want me to read.
Definitely.
36 years of teaching.
Yep.
A wealth of knowledge. There's a lot of people who are doing amazing things. A lot of students you have touched who've learned from you, who are in powerful rooms, who are doing amazing things, and they always give you homage and talk about how bright of a mind you are. We are in a crisis, teacher crisis. There's not a lot of teachers. People are being discouraged. People don't understand the importance of this field and the work they do.
All true.
And I'm seeing so many teachers do Teach for America, teach for 1 year, then get a book deal and write about what's going on in the system.
Right. 36
years. All the people you have touched, your mind. When are you writing your book? Like, this got to happen.
What's that phrase? It just so happens. Something like that. But I knew that I knew I had to wait until I had enough gravel under my tires to really. I started thinking about it, but there was. And this is going to seem a little crazy, but I mean, for me, the whole thing boils down to just kind of like a specific moment that I thought, like, man, I gotta write this shit down. So, teaching at FDA, and the student that I'm talking about is now teaching at City College, right? She went to Georgetown. So, I'm doing group work in my first period. This is first period, by the way, first period class, doing group work and trying to like get them not to sit with their friends and everything. So this one young lady, she's not having it. She doesn't want to play in any reindeer games, nothing. So she's very polite, very intelligent, but dude, totally stubborn. And I can't move the needle. And this is like 8:06. I spent the last hour and a half getting ready for this stuff. I'm like, I got that teacher, like, this is me, baby. And this one kid, and I can't stop focusing on her. So she refuses to sit with this group, that group. And then she just says, well, I'm going home. And she walks out. And I think like, well, okay, problem solved. And then, but the long story short is that eventually she comes back because they won't let her go home because this is FDA. She's outside my class, just pacing back and forth. And I'm having to deal with it. And you've been in the student position, but like all the students are looking at me and they're looking at her, they're looking at me and they want to know, like, what are you going to do? So I get out, I'm like, listen, let's go. You got to get inside. And then she goes, no, thank you. And I'm like, what? And she goes, no, thank you. I said, no, you've got it. She said, no, thank you. And now I'm thinking like, this is like a level of like passive aggressive. I mean, I didn't even know what to do. So back and forth, father, she grabbed her stuff, went on. But eventually by the end of that day, she came back after school, served her time. And I'm not saying cause and effect, but like, I have her next year for AP. Year after that, she's taken a couple other classes. We got really close. Senior year working on it. And then she goes to Georgetown, right? And then she's an author and then she's teaching. But like part of it, I guess I probably told the story poorly, but part of it was I thought that there were things that could be recorded. Now, the other part of it is that white savior stuff that comes up. Because I'm assuming if someone's looking at us right now, this is not like me parachuting into your world and saving you. I just happen to be a person working there, but yet at the same point, there's some optics with it, right? Like white teacher in Harlem, however you want to phrase it. So I guess part of what I've written down too is trying to come to terms with the phrase that I keep using over and over again was I was a part of something, but I was apart from something. And if you're going to be that person, like TFA, we used to call that teach for a while. Where they would come in, put their 1 or 2 years in, then become like an advocate or go to law school. But they would always kind of like always talk about their time uptown or their time in the Bronx or their time in Harlem, which I find is just disingenuous because for me, I always looked at teaching as like what my old man did. You ride until not till you die, but you ride until, you're in it. And this is what you do. This is who you are. It's not like some passing thing to kind of assuage any type of, guilt that you might have. And then you can like dine out on those stories of Raheem for like whatever, but you only spent 2 or 3 years in that. And you know that a lot of city schools, there's big turnover that occurs because of it. So I guess back to your original point. Yeah, I did. I'm pretty much finished with it right now.
That's awesome, man. And We got to get that to the right people, man.
Well, I mean, obviously, you know, you're like a Olympic diver. You got a platform, so make a splash. You know, I'm not proud.
That's all I need to hear.
I'm not proud. Definitely.
If you had something you could tell a first year teacher,
yeah,
what would you tell them?
I was just writing this stuff down. First of all, you got to know your shit, and you have to be enthusiastic about it. Like when I started at FDA, I had to take education classes to get certified. My father was joke certified is not qualified, you know, but like it's all that stuff. But I like if I could dream that dream, if you have a history teacher, you got to have a history major teaching that class. Math, same thing. So you got to know your stuff. You really have to be passionate about it. You've got to make sure that if you set up a ton of rules, kid's going to tune out like that. If you got 3 or 4 things that you believe in and then you enforce at the risk of making a kid quote unquote feel bad, because there has to be, if you set up a series of rules and you start, and I've seen it all the time with young teachers, they start breaking the rules or they do the from now on conversation. Because as soon as you say from now on to a kid, the kid's like, what about all that shit you were telling us before? Well, from now on, we're going to, you know what I mean? So first year teacher, I think you got to be excited about the material. You got to understand who you work for, and you work for those kids in the desks in front of you. That's number one. If you think you work for the DOE, you work for your principal, you're mistaken. And don't get me started on administrators. But the other thing is that the key people in your life, the number one are the kids in front of you. Stay after school, like go the extra mile, and don't do that thing where you think you're an advocate because you're quote unquote relating to a kid. Like advocacy is busting somebody's ass and getting them better at a skill set of writing, reading, public speaking, so they have those tools. Because my thing, like here, back to my construction, I was really good at knocking shit down, putting it up nice and square. Now you asked me to put like a cabinet in it. That's not me. Light fixtures, anything. What I could do is I could demolish, I could set up square walls. So I always looked upon myself as a teacher. I could hand a kid off to a college and the walls are going to be square. Now the professors are the ones that put in all the cabinetry and all that fine stuff. But like that type of thing. So you have to be willing. You have to understand that teaching is a blue collar job. It ain't a white collar job, right? You want to make sure that you have kids do enough heavy lifting that they got fucking calluses on their hands. So when they go to college, they're not going to be overwhelmed. Because if it's just about, you relating to your students, I mean, that can happen. Eventually, I get a rapport with my students, but there's on a daily basis, you have to have expectations. You got to be prepped, and you can't just I've worked with teachers that were proud that they were doing the same shit on this day that they were last year. Like they're like, I'm on schedule right now. And, the kids be damned. And then it's that classic teacher thing. This is the worst thing. I think I'm rambling a little bit.
No, you're good.
But like teachers, the first thing a shitty teacher does is they blame students because they're easy. Because adolescents they're out of their minds. They're going to do stuff that's going to annoy you. They're not going to do work. So you could do that thing like, well, I gave you this opportunity. You didn't do it. And here's your grade. Well, are you willing to stay after school and tell a kid, look, you didn't do your homework. You can come after school and do it. I'll accept it. I'll give you a little deduction, but you can still put your time in. And if you're not willing to put your time in after school, and this really is what FDA kind of helped me because everybody was doing that.
Yeah.
Like you got to go that extra mile, and you can't just, blaming kids it's fucking easy because they're always going to do something aberrant. But at the same time, can you get past that? And then the other thing is, are you willing to make them really, really reach for stuff, knowing that they may not get it, but knowing that they're going to be better, than they were if you just simply gave them like handouts and stuff like that?
Speaking of going extra mile, and I'm probably rambling going back. I remember being in your class, you used to have people come through. I remember, say John went to West Point, you had connections at West Point. Talk a little bit about that, and
all right. Talk
a little bit also about, like the idea of going extra mile, ways that teachers can do that.
Right.
And also about what you're doing now. I know you're retired.
Yep.
Quote unquote retired. You always at FDA.
Yeah.
I text you.
Yeah. I like to think of myself as Ron Artest. I'm coming off the bench, but I ain't starting.
Got you.
Got you. So I was fortunate to have, I'm from a large family, and I have older sister, a younger and older sister who live in Connecticut, and they had a friend of theirs. But essentially, how can I tell the story? My first year at FDA, I took my homeroom out to my sister's place in Connecticut. Pool party, did that with AP too. So there's this kid in my class. I'll call him O. We talk all the time. And this is back in the day too. He's probably in his mid-30s right now. So when you get out to New Canaan, coming from 125th Street, Metro North, go out to New Canaan. These are like circular driveway suburbia, like investment banker suburbia. So I happen to be in the car with Omar. We're getting driven from the station to my sister's house, and he's looking around, and he goes, like, how do you get a house like this? I said, well, talk to my sister and talk to her husband. Now, they both came from middle-class families. They went to Wharton B School, investment bankers. And so their education was the trampoline that got them to this specific point, right? So Omar started talking to them, and he found out, like, there's something called investment banking. Now, I'm not making this shit up. We get there, right? So it's my class. They're coming in, piling in there. My sister has 5 boys, oldest of whom recognizes Omar. Omar recognizes him, because they played hockey against one another, at 145th Street in Harlem. So there's that. Now, stay with this. So Omar finds out he's a sophomore at this point. He's kind of turning around. I can see him. Junior year, much more serious. Senior year, working college stuff. And he goes to Carnegie Mellon, right? So he goes to Carnegie Mellon, comes out of college, and what is he? He becomes an investment banker. Now, he's doing investment banking. Way back in the day, he found out about it. He calls my sister, and a resume comes across his desk. The resume is my nephew that he played hockey against. 6 years later, resume comes across his desk. He calls my sister, this your son? And she goes, yeah. She goes, keep an eye out for him. Now, I'm just saying that. So later on, what happens is my sister would come drive in from Connecticut, and I made an agreement with my AP students that I would work on your college process with you until you hit send. So from sophomore, junior, senior year, common application, all that stuff. Now she came in, took kids on trips, fed them, had connections to big time universities, got people in front of big donors. The West Point, her husband went to West Point, all that stuff. But I was just in a situation where I had people that had this skill set. I just happened to be related to them. And then all of a sudden, this became like the next thing. So when I would recruit for AP, I always told my AP students, I remember I gave you the same speech. First year, I said, listen, this is going to be unpleasant for you, but at some point, we're going to be done. We're going to be having juice and cookies. We're going to watch movies. Yeah. Which we did. Yeah. And then we're going to start thinking about, because again, if I just think about you as a high school student, it's not good enough. So now you got to think about, and this is my former student, I mentioned Felix, who went to Columbia. He told me that at some point in his career, he stopped looking at himself as a student. He started looking at himself as a candidate. And that became my mindset. Like, I had to look at you as a college candidate and not just a student. And again, what an advanced placement program will do is a kid will have 3 or 4 or 5 APs on their transcript. And now they're in a competitive atmosphere with students that come from much more advantaged backgrounds. So that's, this was all family stuff, contributing money. They bought books for me because these people have done well, and I just happened to be in a situation where I was thankful that, I had students that there was a need that was there, and I had people that could jump in, and they did.
Yeah, I remember again, difficult 10th grade, and your sister came and did a whole speech for us, and it was like, I thought you was doing reverse psychology. It was like, everybody was motivated again, like, what, this could be our life? No. This is what we can accomplish. So everybody was like, you're going home and... Right. And I'm not saying, look, I'm not saying it's just me, but I know, correct if I'm wrong, but I know when you got to college, you felt you had a skill set that would allow you to perform. And that was the climate that existed at FDA. Yeah. It was a college prep school for real. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times people were like, oh my God, how did you do so well in college? And you look at the zip code and you look at the schools you went to. And I always tell people, like, I was prepared for college. I was super fortunate, regardless of the neighborhoods that the schools was located in, Harlem, South Bronx. Yeah, life wasn't easy when I went home. But when I got to FDA, I had a quality education. And I had a lot of teachers, a lot of support of people who pushed us, who made it uncomfortable. You weren't easy on us. But when I got to Africana Studies, I was like, oh, thank God, because now I got a kid. Now life is really, I'm being an adult. Right. I got jobs, and I was able to manage so much of that because I just knew how to study. Something as simple as studying. Yep. I knew how to take notes. I knew how to, like when you taught us the Cornell notes, like what to pay attention to, stop wasting your time, how to use my time wisely, which is all these skills you need to be successful in college. Right. So. Because
if you don't have calluses, your hands are going to hurt and you can't lift. Yeah. It's like coming into 2-a-days and you're out of shape. It's going to be tough for you, Do I get to ask you a question?
Of course, yes, sir.
Let's talk about race. White teachers, or is there? How do you get either beyond the perception? What is it? Dig a little bit deeper. Does it matter? I'm just curious.
It did matter at first.
It's got to, right?
You were very like.
And dude, I'm not trying to get you to start blowing smoke. You know what I mean?
Nah, let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it.
You were very stern.
Yup.
You had a type of swag and energy to you, so it was easy to respect you. But there were times where it was like, this dude can't relate to me. Why is he being so hard? Mm-hmm. But the fact that comes across is that you can't fake being genuine. You can't. I could see even as kids. I think my kids realize things all the time.
Kids are
when I'm trying
perfect
to
bullshit
them,
protectors.
Yeah, when I'm trying to G them, when I'm trying to play them with somebody. Like sometimes I bring Emily with me, just let me know, like, yo, what you thought about that person?
Right.
Dad, that person's weird.
Yep.
That person is not nice. So like they can see it. So with you, it was always genuine. Even when we tried you, even when we do something wrong, even when you come to try to poke you, it was always, you never stopped being you. This was the Murphy you was going to get no matter what.
All right. So let me ask the question a different way. Is there any other way to look at the narrative other than here's some white dude that taught for 34 years in Harlem and South Bronx? Or like, do you know what I mean? Because I'm trying to process it. I still try to process it myself, Not a fucking crusader, none of that stuff. But it's like categorical that exists. I'm just wondering, what are the layers of that?
Ask me that again.
Okay.
I'm trying.
I probably asked it poorly. And this is, when you discuss race, sometimes you sort of fumble over it. But is there any other way to look at it as just teacher in a school, or like, because here's what I would find is I would get people, they would ask me all the time, like, so you're a teacher, like, these are people that I don't know. So where do you teach? And I would say, well, I teach in New York City. And eventually I made them work for it. You know what I mean? So what do you mean? Well, I teach in a public school. Where's the public school? So I would tease it out, and then you drop the H word on them, right? And then it becomes what I call like Daffy Duck, like the pronoun trouble, where they would go like, what are they like? What are those students? And there's like an obvious preconception that exists. And I think the thing that I fight with in writing things down is just to talk about like my day-to-day existence, but there's a very real component that exists at the same time.
I think there is, from my experience, there was a lot of teachers who tried to overcompensate who didn't look like me.
There you go.
There were a lot of teachers who...
What did that overcompensation look like, by the way?
Like...
Or what did it feel like? Maybe I should ask.
Okay? Right. Are you this?
There you go.
Making excuses for me.
Yep.
And it got to the point where if I knew I couldn't accomplish something or life was just in my head, I knew I could guilt trip them. And That's sorry to say this, teachers.
There's
a lot of teachers.
This shit's valuable, bro.
A lot of teachers that I got over with. And I even did it in college. Yo, I have a kid. You don't understand. Oh my God, don't worry, John. You can turn in this paper.
Right.
But the teachers that I learned the most from was the ones who was like, yeah, okay, and I can't give you more excuses because you're black, because that's racism within itself.
Of course it is.
Overcompensating for you and lowering my expectations for you.
Diminished expectations is racism.
So the teachers that nowadays that I look up and I'm glad that put me through it and I see why they did certain things throughout my journey now as an adult,
right,
are the ones who were like you, was just like, yo, Murphy, I'm gonna have a baby. This is it. When are you going to college? What college are you going to? Like, your Common App need to really be done. Can you meet me after class today so I can go through it?
Right.
All right, add this personal element to your story. But Murphy, how I'm gonna feed this kid? Like, that's nice, but nothing has changed. If anything, you need to outperform everybody now, right? So, and at the moment,
by the way, I didn't know whether I was just pulling this answer out of my ass either. You know what I mean? Like,
no.
In that moment, I'm thinking like, what the fuck am I going to tell this kid?
Yeah. But at the end of the day, I needed that, right? Like, right. I needed that moment. I needed that people, because in my head, 17, it was over.
Yep.
Started working at Family Dollar across the Marcy projects.
Yep.
My check, I could barely still buy Pampers. So now I'm like, F this. I know I'm gonna be a dad. I'm about to risk it all. But then you come to a school and it's like, yo, I told you to come after class. Did you see the comment app? And then you got some teachers like, you can see it all over your face. Like, you had it, kid. You gave up. I feel bad for you. You know, good luck with everything.
Right.
No conversation, no expectation.
Right.
It's just like, I'm one of them. And it was always the teacher was like, I don't care about none of that. This is what you need to do. You need to do APs. Oh man, my mom on drugs. That's nice. I'm gonna be here to support you.
Well,
I'm gonna stay here.
I mean, the best advice for new teachers is what you just did. It's like and what?
And what? Yeah.
And what's next?
That's my personal experience.
Right.
So it's very easy to look past race. It's very easy to look past color when somebody is creating a standard for you and somebody's giving you structure.
Right.
Kids need structure.
Yep.
And whether we are,
they'll tell you they don't.
Yeah, we all
tell you they don't.
My kids think they don't need structure, but I gotta give them structure.
Right.
So when I always went to, and especially a kid like me who didn't have the structure at home, when I went and FDA gave me that structure and teachers like you told me what an AP was, why it was important, let me see a glimpse of what life could be like. Not just, as white America, you were bringing back alumni who were doing a damn thing. It's like, he looked just like you, John. And then you would come whisper in our ear, he from the Bronx too. Walk away, do little funny things like you minimize the excuses so much.
But bro, you remember former students coming back and they would say, I sat right there. Like that, dude, if you're a new teacher, that shit is powerful medicine. When someone is up there.
Carnegie Mellon, sir. I remember one dude. Oh my God, I can't remember his name. Oh, Prince is another story.
Prince is another story.
We talked recently. He's doing neurosurgery at Yale now. Yeah. But not Prince. It was another dude.
Right.
Dude named Kevin. I think he do like private jets now for people and stuff like that. Went to Syracuse. You brought him back. You brought him back my 10th grade year. Dude is with like
Kelvin or Kevin?
That's one of them.
I know. I mean, you remember it, that's fine. Sometimes, 5,000 students up there forget.
Private jets, and I'll be seeing them was on Revolt. Like, I'm like, and these were the people you were bringing back to us and was like.
Well, I mean, just, I think 3 months ago, I'm having dinner with 2 students that you know really well. Both of these young ladies are Columbia law grads. Mm-hmm. And I'm just having dinner, by the way, at a joint where I could see my old school rice at a joint I could never afford. Because now Harlem has been so bourgeoified. Yeah. You know, this is a place that I would never go to. And I'm sitting with these 2 young ladies, and all I wanted to do was to look at the other people in the restaurant. Like, do you understand who the fuck is sitting here? 135th Street, and Jazzy was 123 in the barrio, and their stories. And that's, I mean, maybe writing stuff down was just for me to try to communicate what it's like to be part of these stories and to be around students they're just so motivated and so fucking hilarious too.
Yeah, I remember we went out to lunch and you just stared at me like,
dude, exactly.
How does that happen? So
exactly.
And I just feel like especially, I'm a huge advocate for teachers. I give teachers a lot of thanks for me. And it's like, these stories need to be told. It needs to be told and it needs to be understood. But yeah, back to the race question. It's just like when somebody give you structure, and somebody's going the extra mile, every time I got an excuse, well, I'll stay to 5 with you. I'll do this. I'll do this. All right, you didn't turn this. Kind of like you said, I'll see you tomorrow. You're going to get a less grade. But it's like, yo, I can't get over on this guy.
That's it.
Why you keep holding me to this high standard? But, and I'm not to say it works for everybody, but I could appreciate it more.
Right.
And it's very easy to look past color when you feel that genuine love, that genuine care, and somebody's trying to put you in a position to succeed.
Sure.
I have one last question for you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I got 2 questions.
Okay.
What are you doing now? How's retirement?
2 things happen. One, people come up and they go, so what are you doing now? And I'm like, fuck does that mean? I mean, 36 years, 5 classes a day, but people, people are always thinking you're going to reinvent yourself. You're going to do this, traveling, all that stuff. Dude, I'm not mall walking. I'm not playing golf. I don't got a members only jacket. I don't have Rockports. So that shit hasn't happened yet. But I essentially, I kind of felt that itch the same way my old man felt the itch when he retired, and then he went teaching at Attica. So I'm actually, in a crazy way, kind of back in my old school doing, I'm saying yesterday at this time, I'm at FDA and I'm like, no kids are showing up because I've already dealt with some kids. So I was packed up, ready to go. Kid shows up. I'm like, God damn. So I got to go back, turn on the lights. Kid comes in and all of a sudden he just starts telling me the story. I'm like, oh my God, man. You know what I mean? So it's just, I still, that buzz, that nervousness of being in front of a kid and saying, okay, let's talk about Common App, let's do that stuff. So in a small way, I get to do the gravy without having to fucking take attendance, man. It's kind of nice. No more first period for me, bro. Yeah.
But that's awesome. All right, ready for my last question?
Sure.
It's a question I ask anybody before they leave.
All right.
What does a professional winner mean to you?
A professional winner? I think, man, I think you may have that quit in you. Like I was a great quitter. You know, I quit a lot of shit. You may have that quit in you, but it's kind of just that idea that you've got to stay in it. And it may not be the result that you expect, but I do think there's that value. I know I did this document with you. Nietzsche,
yes.
Will to Power.
Yes.
So his thing, Nietzsche, not a fun-loving guy. I mean, you know, but his essential thing is like I ran a marathon once, right? It was just, I did all the wrong things. But Nietzsche's thing is like, the closer you get to your goal, the more the forces are working against you to try to achieve that goal. So then the question is, well, fuck it. If it's a marathon, I'll drop out at mile 2. I'm not invested. Now, get to mile 25, dropping out there, what you're going to sense is a tremendous sense of defeat. But if you can keep pushing and trying to get to that goal, and then you get to that point, that's really where that sense of accomplishment is. So generally speaking, there's like, I mean, I don't know shit about physics or whatever, but like, it's almost like an inverse proportion. And so I think a professional winner, which I don't think I am, by the way, I'm like fucking amateur, but professional winner is just understanding that generally speaking, the forces are going to work harder against you before you get to your goal. The question is, are you going to drop and then the goal just kind of dwindles and you just go away? Or when you get there, it's going to be that much sweeter. And also Nietzsche would tell you that if you finished a marathon and you cross the finish line, start stretching and then what's your next race? That's what he would say.
You know, it's hard. You texted me yesterday, stop calling you Mr. Murphy. So
yeah,
Murph, appreciate you.
Thanks, brother. Great. I had a great time.
Yes, sir. That's the end of the Professional on the Podcast. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.